We will discuss the other chapters like work and economic life, politics and society, religion, social change. So those 4 chapters I will discuss, but we will now try to understand the Indian thinkers here. Okay, so we will try to move for paper 2. We will try to complete the Indian thinkers. Very easy. Today and tomorrow I will complete it, and then we will move towards paper 2, and then we can complete the other areas. One chapter, one day is enough for those topics. So any doubts? So we will start with Indian thinkers. Mainly you have 3. Okay, so you will see here Indological perspective, the first one, G.S. Ghurye. The structural functional perspective, M.N. Srinivas. Marxist perspective, A.R. Desai. Out of this, you already know about these 2 perspectives, right? Structural functional perspective, this is the version of Durkheim actually. Okay, so we have discussed this structural functionalism in Durkheim, and also we have discussed this under Parson. Okay, so exactly the same thing. M.N. Srin was actually Indian version of Emile Durkheim, and in fact I have made this mistake when I wrote my paper 2 answer. I keep on writing Durkheim instead of M.N. Srinivas in 1 or 2 answers, and that actually affected in my score in paper 2. So this is exactly the same concept, same ideas, and here Marxist perspective, A.R. Desai. So we will see the context, we will see the evolution. So initially it was Indological perspective, then immediately after independence, like post 1947, during this time you can see there is an overwhelming importance of this particular perspective, structural functional perspective, and you can see that theories of stratifications and all those theories that we have discussed during 1940s, right? So we have discussed those theories of stratification etc. during 1940s. So there is an impact and influence of functional theories during this time. So post independence, the main perspective which we used is actually structural functional perspective. Apart from that, we got independence and we need to go with the welfare policy. So you need to identify things in a functional way. So there was no relevance for Marxist approach or conflict perspective at that point of time, because you are giving enough time for the state to fulfill the promises, to implement the programs and everything. So there is no need of critical evaluation of state policies or anything. But when it comes to 1960s and 70s etc., during this time, despite the fact that the government have promised a lot of things, those promises were not implemented properly, or if it is implemented, it was not successful. Even the land reform was not successful. There were a lot of issues with land reforms. A lot of problems was there. Okay, this politician, the landlord's nexus was there. Village official landlord nexus was there. So actually, land reform, which was a promise which was made during the time of freedom struggle, it was although implemented, but the implementation was not that good. Okay, and that also resulted into increase in inequalities. Even Green Revolution also resulted into increase in income inequality, regional inequality. So Naxalism also started emerging during this time. That's what we will discuss, the relevance of Marxist perspective from 1960s and 70s to critically evaluate the state policy. So immediately after independence, which one is dominant? This is dominant. The functional perspective is dominant, because we need to see everything in a functional term. We don't want to critically analyze the newly formed welfare state. So structural functional approach was more preferable, and went for the field work etc. We will discuss about M.N. Srinivas in detail. So there you will see that. Then the context for Marxist perspective was in India during this time post independence, after around 10-20 years, the implementation of policy, there were a lot of issues. Inequality, instead of reducing, it was actually increasing. Okay, so all these are the problems, and that led to the context for emergence of Marxist perspective. Now when we discuss about apart from this too, Indology is actually, it is there from the beginning. Even from 1773 onwards, actually Indology is there, but different versions of Indology you will see. So here we need to mostly focus on sociological Indology. Indology means it's all about study of India. Indology. Okay, so when the Britishers came, so when we discuss about 1773 onwards, after the Regulating Act, or after the Governor General Warren Hastings take charge, he want to regulate, or he want to control India. So if you need to control India, you need to have a control over the legal system as well as the legal system as well as the revenue collection, right? Law and revenue collection. So they had no idea about the legal system in India, also the revenue collection in India. Who will collect revenue, how much to be collected as the revenue, okay, so when to collect revenue, all these things are not known to them. In India, Mughals time, we had a different system which is known as Lagan, but they don't have any idea about that, and predominantly the revenue is coming from agriculture, but in their case it is not the case, right? So they have no idea. So the only possibility that you can rule India, or if you need to rule India, you have to have a control over this. So they started studying about India. So Indology is actually emerging from this aspect, so for the administrative purpose. So if you see the initial Indologists, they all were British administrators, okay? So you can see British administrators on one side and British scholars also. So British scholars were studying out of their interest, British administrators studying out of their interest. So British administrators, they actually come up with an idealized picture of Indian village, very traditional, very orthodox aspects of the Indian villages were actually highlighted by the British administrators, whereas the British scholars have seen it with great suspicion. So even though you can see in the beginning it's all about British, right? British administrators, British scholars. Later Indian scholars will come, and then maybe after 1920s, when sociology established in India, okay, as a different body of knowledge, then we can say G.S. Ghurye and all, that is a sociological Indology. So when I'm talking about Indology, we can divide it into classical Indology. So like we will discuss about a lot of British administrators like Max Muller, Henry Maine, all these people are related to classical Indology. So mostly it is for administrative purpose. The British administrators were the initial Indologists, okay. Later the scholars will become that is what sociological Indology. So there has to be a difference between classical Indology and social or sociological or modern Indology. So social or sociological or modern Indology. So we will be seeing what is this. So Indology means it's all about study of India. Now how you're going to study India? You're going to read the old religious textbooks, etc. Okay, all religious textbooks, archaeological excavation, the travelogues of the kings. So in all these ways you're going to study India. So Indology means the context you need to understand first, because the Britishers came, they want to rule India. For that they want to study India. Without knowing about the legal system and the revenue collection, for example, when you talk about legal system, Indian legal system is totally different to English setup, right? Maybe in criminal cases, if you see, there is a uniformity in criminal cases, which was actually set by Mughals. The laws were partly Islamic and partly local. Among Hindus and Muslims, criminal cases, it was almost equal. But when it comes to civil cases, it was totally different. In fact, it was polar opposites, right? Hindu system and Muslim system. Hindus were following Manusmriti, Islam following the Quran or Hadith, etc. So the laws are different when it comes to civil cases like adoption, okay, like marriage, divorce, etc. So the laws are poles apart. Revenue also, they face the problem, so they have to study India. That's the context for Indology. So who are the initial Indologists? It is the British administrators. What were their idea? They have given an idealized picture of India by referring to the traditional old textbooks, etc. Okay. Then comes modern Indology. So let's go back to the PDF and we will see what is this concept. So these topics are very easy. Whatever, there is nothing, there is no new concepts you need to study here. See here, this already you know the structural functional perspective, okay. So there is nothing new you need to study here. Marxist perspective, you know exactly the same thing. You're going to apply it in India. So you use Marxist perspective to study land reform. You use this to study Green Revolution. You use this to study the caste. So there is nothing new for you to study. It is only about using that perspective in the Indian context. So it will be very easy for you. That's why I've told you, once you know the thinkers, if your logic and thinkers are clear, these are going to be so easy and you will see that soon. Okay, so can we move with the PDF now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So understanding Indian society has been a complex exercise right from the beginning of sociology as a discipline in India during 1920s. So 1920s onwards, sociology emerged as a distinct discipline in India. The complexity of Indian society represent itself in terms of number of paradoxes. These paradoxes include various dichotomies like this is India. India is a land of paradox, right? Tradition versus modernity. So if you remember when we discussed about Parson, I've told you we are facing the dilemma with respect to the choice of tradition versus modernity or ascription versus achievement, right? Particularism versus universalism. So these are the problem that India face. India is a land of paradox. Even you can start with your essays also with this. If some social related, for example, if you get a question on women or violence against women or whatever it is, you can say India is a land of paradox. On one side, women is treated as goddess, right? On the other hand, she was denied of all the basic rights and amenities, etc. And you can write in all the possible way. You can talk about manifest things, you can talk about latent things, function, the violence, everything you can mention over there. So India is a land of paradoxes. Tradition versus modernity, change versus continuity, culture versus structure, fact versus value. I've stressed on this also before when we discussed about joint family versus nuclear family. What is a fact? Fact is that it is nuclear family, or there is a move towards nuclear family in the contemporary society, because that is the structural fit for the modern society. So you have to use these words like this only. That's what make it sociological. Otherwise, everything is common, right? So when you're studying, when you're saying something like nuclear family is desirable for sociology, desirable for industrial society or capitalist society, that is a normal students will say what you need to say, like what Parsons said, nucleated family. Instead of nuclear family, you can say maybe nucleated family or instrumental family is a structural fit for capitalist society or the industrial society. Okay. Value, jointness is preferred. Okay, so these paradoxes permeates through each and every sphere of social life, causing a problem in developing a clear view of Indian society. Although information about Indian society is contained in ancient and medieval scriptures, but a conscious attempt to understand the Indian society and culture were made after the establishment of politico-administrative rule by the British. So that's what I've told you, post 1773, especially after Warren Hastings period. You can see Indology emerged, and you can see during 1776, can you connect it to history, something which you have learned here, 1776, Code of Jendu laws, right? Jendu code, that was actually codification of Manusmriti. So Manusmriti was translated to Code of Jendu laws or Jendu code, and then something in 1781, 2017, this was a prelims question, 2018. What happened in 1781? So if this was related to Hindus, something related to Muslims. Can you tell me?
First Muslim university or something.
Muslim University, Calcutta Madrasa. This is not university.
Yeah, Madrasa.
Calcutta Madrasa was established. Okay. And something in 1784?
Asiatic Society of Bengal.
Asiatic
William
Society.
John.
Yeah. Yeah, Himanshu, you messaged me that you're watching my history class, that's why.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So where we stop? Okay. So Indian society and culture. Yeah. After 1760s, the British administrators were given the responsibilities for developing such understanding. This practice continued up till 1850s. During this, an orthodox view of Indian society was generated to suit the colonial interest. Okay, so I've told you the British administrators, they highlighted the orthodox character, the traditional character, and they completely maligned India. They only highlighted the bad aspect of India, and they have claimed that their role in India is basically to civilize India, to modernize India. Okay, that's a so-called white man's burden. The society was understood in terms of self-sufficient villages, okay, caste and primitive political system, and in terms of joint family. After 1850s, the British rule in India extended to the whole country, and India came under the direct control of British government. New efforts were made by the British government for developing a view of Indian society by sending academicians like anthropologists, theologists, and other writers. Christian missionaries also played a significant role in the whole process. Towards the end of 19th century, a large number of educated Indians contributed towards developing a more realistic understanding. Specific books were written on different aspects of Indian society, like books on caste, joint families, Jajmani system, panchayats, etc. So these parts, these are not important for us. That's why I'm just reading it out. Okay, you just need to say before 1920s it was classical Indology. It was for the mostly administrative purpose. Then it is more important. Thus, up till 1920s, reliance was more on textual sources of understanding Indian society. Although a large number of translations done by Europeans helped in identifying the cultural institutions followed by people across the country. After 1920s, theoretical perspectives were used to understand Indian society. So post 1920s, theoretical perspectives, that means sociological Indology now going to come. For example, G.S. Ghurye used other perspectives along with Indology to develop a modern Indological approach. Okay, so that is after 1920s you will see modern Indology. So you have to make a very clear distinction here. When we write in sociology, this area is what we need to focus more. Okay, thus up till 1947, Indological perspective remained dominant. So till 1947, Indological perspective was dominant, but was combined with other theoretical perspectives to develop a more realistic view. For example, when we discuss about one thinker, Radha Kamal Mukherjee, we will say Indology, okay, Indology plus Marxist perspective, and developed a Marxological approach. So before 1947, some kind of Marxist approach was there, but immediately after independence, that relevance has gone. But then post 1960s, that relevance has came back again. That's what I said. I didn't deny the fact that before 1947, Marxism was there. Okay. So after 1947, sociology was extended to different universities, which resulted in gradual expansion of theoretical perspective to study Indian society. The newly established welfare state required realistic and factual view of Indian society for the purpose of planning. This resulted in the use of field view and a more structural functional perspective. Okay, to study Indian society, a large number of village studies were conducted, and various perspectives like structural functionalism by M.N. Srinivas. This is a predominant perspective, and this is what we need to study. Statistical positivism by I.P. Desai, Marxist perspective by A.R. Desai were used to interpret the data and draw conclusions. Apart from this, other approaches used were the psychoanalytical view, structural historical approach, culturological approach, philosophical view, and institutional approach, etc. These are not important for us, just I have written here. Okay, maybe culturological approach of Yogendra Singh we will see, but apart from that, the others are not that important. You need to have an idea. Apart from that, not that important. Now, sociology as a discipline in India. So we will see the emergence of sociology in India. Sociology in India was introduced by Sir Patrick Giddens in 1919 in the Bombay University, and in Lucknow University it was taught by Radha Kamal Mukherjee in 1921. In Bombay University, Giddens was succeeded by Ghurye. Okay, after that, up till independence, Ghurye was mainly responsible for expansion of sociology in India. Up till independence, sociology was taught mainly along with other disciplines, which led to a trend towards use of combination of sociological perspectives with other perspectives. So, see, sociology was relatively a very young discipline, right? Emerged in 1838 only, so not much theories, not much studies, not much perspectives were there. Okay, so up till 1940s, it was taught along with other disciplines. So you can see combination of different perspectives within Indology. Okay, after independence, sociology witnessed tremendous expansion, and separate departments of sociology were introduced in many universities. So this paragraph is also not that important for your knowledge. I have just written one paragraph, that's it. Okay, exam point of view, this is not important for you. Now here, this is the important one. So you can get a short note. So you need to prepare, I have enough content here, you need to prepare a 10 marker. 10 marker means maximum 150 words is what you need to pick from here. There's around 300-350 words are here. And maybe next one 20 marker. 20 marker, for that you need 250 words. Okay. So here the perspective is there, the important points are there, and then criticism is there. So you need to arrange it accordingly. Even if the question is about 10 marker, you should be in a position to incorporate criticism, but maybe one or two. Even if it is 20 marker, you need to write the criticism. So it is a big challenge for you to take the content from here. Okay. Now apart from this, I'm only talking about Indological perspective here. When we discuss about Ghurye, see in the another chapters like caste, we will talk about Ghurye there also. In the chapter of village, we will be talking about Ghurye there also. In the chapter of tribal communities, we will be briefly discussing about Ghurye everywhere. So all these studies has to be accommodated here, and you have to give examples from all these studies here. So I will not be giving it here because I am only interested in teaching you the perspective here. Okay, so when we discuss about tribes, I'll tell you what is Ghurye's views on tribes. When we discuss about caste, I will tell you what was Ghurye's approach of caste, like attributional approach. He will try to identify the attributes of caste. That's what attributional approach. So he will identify 6 features of caste. So in caste, you can get a question, features of caste system, that is one question. Then also you need to quote Ghurye. Or when you're talking about Indological perspective of Ghurye, you need to bring in the study of caste, and he used attributional perspective that we are going to study in caste system anyway. So this is how you need to interconnect. So paper 2, I am giving it open to you, so there is nothing which is closed. In paper 1, what all things that we have discussed, it's not the same way that we are going to proceed with paper 2. Paper 2, everything is open. You need to contribute a lot from your side. You need extra readings, okay, from whatever source possible. You can read IGNO, mainly you can read. Apart from that, other textbooks I'll tell you, okay. So Indology literally means the systematic study of Indian society and culture. It is an initial perspective to study Indian society. The task of Indological perspective is to interpret and understand Indian society on the basis of traditional Indian religious text. Okay, so what is Indology? It's all about understand Indian society. So it's mostly about understanding society. There is no solution which is provided. So this is one of the criticism. So you're only trying to understand the social problems, but no solution is provided. Ancient legal and historical, religious textbooks, ancient legal and historical documents, archaeological evidences, and other literary works. You can put a comma here. The religious textbooks like Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Vedas, etc. Historical texts like Kautilya's Arthashastra, various travelogues, writings by kings, archaeological sites, including inscriptions, pillars, monuments, etc., have been used by the Indologists to develop their understanding in Indian society. So Indology means what? In simple terms, you are trying to understand the Indian society, the culture of Indian society, the structure of Indian society through various old textbooks, writings, archaeological excavations, etc. So this paragraph you need to summarize in one line. Okay, you don't want to write this much. Indological studies comprise of studying language, ideals, beliefs, customs, etc. So Indological study comprise of everything. Ghurye is studying about family, Ghurye is studying about religion, Ghurye is study about tribes, Ghurye is study about caste. Okay, so you need to add all these as examples, based on the demand of the question. So sometimes instead of asking Indology, they can simply ask you Ghurye's idea of caste system or Ghurye's study on religion. Although it is not there in syllabus, but you may be expecting this level of question also if the paper is difficult. If it is easy, you will get it directly. Thus, culture, these miscellaneous topics that we will leave it and we can cover it later. Anytime I can cover it in the app, or we can cover it after the prelims also. So those are miscellaneous topics that nobody can actually cover from the class. So thus culture is, this is very important. Culture is central instrument through which an understanding of Indian society is developed. So what you're ultimately trying to do in Indology, you're trying to study the culture. Okay, in this way various aspects of Indian society like religion, so you need to study this, caste, family, jajmani system, panchayat, etc. were seen from cultural angle, and accordingly a view of Indian society were generated without taking into consideration the variations in the actual reality. See, for example, what is understanding? What is understanding? It is cultural understanding. It is a bookish view, right? It is a bookish view. not the actual reality. What is there in paper and what is the actual reality may be entirely different. So we will see later that, when, for example, now itself I can tell you what is the dominant caste. Brahmins are the dominant caste as per the culture, as per the books, but it is not necessary that the Brahmins are dominant. In some areas, some other caste may be dominant, and that concept is actually given by Srinivas through his field study. Some other caste are dominant, that is provided certain conditions are satisfied. They have numerical strength, okay, they have land wealth, okay, they have education, they have government jobs. So if some conditions are satisfied, some other caste can also be dominant in that area, not necessarily Brahmins. So there is a concept of dominant caste. So that is actually against this view. So that is a reality. Secondly, there is another concept of Sanskritization. Through Sanskritization, you can actually change caste. This is also the concept given by M. N. Srinivas. We will discuss this. So dominant caste and Sanskritization, these can be asked as 10 marker. We will discuss this separately. So Sanskritization means even the lower caste can actually change their caste. In fact, before when we discussed about stratification, I have discussed this point. So, but cultural understanding is what? You born in a caste, you cannot change the caste. Okay, caste is a closed system, but it is not necessary. There is a possibility of mobility through Sanskritization. Another way of mobility, we have discussed hypergamy, hypogamy. That is only for female. And the marriage rule in India, which I have told you, right? The caste exogamy. This is Brahmins, this is Kshatriya. Between them, marriage is not allowed, right? Caste exogamy is not allowed. So this is marriage rule in India. So this is what reflected in Ghurye study. Marriage rule in India is caste exogamy, and you marry within. That is caste endogamy. And do you know when this was legalized? Caste exogamy was legalized in India when? Any idea? Anyone? When this was legalized in India? 1872.
No idea.
Under which act? Under which Governor General? Northbrook. Okay. Under which act? Universal Marriage Act. Okay. So you can see a lot of reforms that they are doing. 1828, what happened with respect to the social reform? 1828, why it is important? For which reform? With respect to female?
Sati abolition.
Anti-Sati resolution. Yeah. And then what about 1856?
Widow Remarriage Act.
Widow Remarriage Act. And then 1872, this thing was promoted. So these are few. Okay. Now Ghurye studied this, and Ghurye also come up with the same understanding: caste exogamy, and within clan. Okay, you can see here. I'll take another color. I've already discussed this. There are different gotras, right? Clans, you will say. So you cannot marry within clan because you all are the descendants of the same ancestor. Means you all are blood related. So blood related people should not marry. So clan endogamy is not permitted. Clan endogamy is not permitted. What you need to do? Clan exogamy. This is a marriage rule. Now see, all these related people stay together in a village. So this clan, this word technically I am using. Sometimes you will see some books, you will see village. Okay, why village? Sometimes you will see village exogamy. Why village exogamy? Technically it is clan exogamy only. But the entire clan, entire gotra prefer to stay together. So that becomes a village. So can you marry from the village? No, you have to marry from the outside village. So that is what village exogamy. That is what taught by Ghurye. Okay, so this is actually the problem of honor killing. If you marry from the village, there is a problem. Why the problem? Because this is the rule. Clan exogamy is the rule. Why in village there is a problem? Because in the village all the relatives are staying together. Typically in Punjab and Haryana, not in other states. Okay, so okay, so now these are the assumptions of Indological perspective. It assumes uniqueness of Indian civilization. See, they are saying, Ghurye is saying Indian society is very unique, so Indian society has to be studied in a unique way. The concepts and theories and everything that you have learned in Western, with respect to Western society, cannot be applied in India as it is. Okay, so he believed the uniqueness of Indian civilization. So it assumes the uniqueness of Indian civilization and society, and claim that Indian society can only be understood with their concepts and theories particular to Indians, with the concept and theories particular to Indian society. The Western concepts and theories cannot be applied to Indian society as it is. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Believe in uniqueness. The emphasis is more on developing an understanding rather than providing a solution. I've told you this point already. Indologists attempted to understand society in terms of historical moorings, that is, in terms of its continuity from the past. So, how it is continued from the past. Thus, historical understanding is integrated with the Indological studies. Indologists refrain from using different field view, means they are not interested in studying actual reality, they are only interested in bookish view on account of innumerable variations and heterogeneities existing in Indian society. So, only understand what is said by the culture, what is there in the books. Okay, so Indological perspective have gradually developed after the middle of 18th century, and broadly it is understood in two ways. Classical Indology, so that is before 1920s. Indology before 1920s has been referred to as classical Indologies. Thus, in this perspective, understanding was purely based on religious text using Sanskrit and other language sources, right? The initial emphasis of Indology was on translation of religious text. William John established Asiatic Society of Bengal in 1784, which emerged as a major center for Indology. Max Muller's Sacred Books of East became a major source of information as it contained translation of important religious texts. After the middle of 19th century, Sir Henry, this is classical Indology, so I'm just reading it out. This is not important for us, okay? But just for your knowledge. So after middle of 19th century, Sir Henry Maine's Ancient Law in 1861 and village communities in the East and West 1871 were considered as references for Indological studies. Initially, the Indologists were mainly British officials or other Western scholars. So I've told you, either British officials, British administrators, or British scholars in the beginning, right? British administrator, British scholars. So here they completely maligned India. They tried to justify their rule in India. Here they have seen it with great appreciation and honor because these are scholars. They came to study India with their own interest, no specific, interest to justify their rule in India. Okay, so on one side they maligned India, on the other side they have highlighted the good aspects. Okay, but towards the end of 19th century, number of Indian Indologists started various schools of Indology like Theosophical Society of Oriental Research Institute 1891, Oriental Institute of Baroda, Bhandarkar Institute of Pune. Broadly, Western scholars had an orthodox and sometimes critical view of Indian society. The Indian Indologists developed or emphasized on uniqueness and the glorious past. Okay. Now, modern Indology. After 1919, with the establishment of sociology as a discipline, the classical Indology school was modified into a more rational and academic perspective. G.S. Ghurye is considered as the father of modern Indology. It can be also understood as social Indology or sociological Indology. Modern Indological perspective have mainly two strands. Now, this perspective was used by academicians who are trained in the particular discipline rather than officials or literary experts. Before it was literary experts or officials, but now it is mainly academicians who were studied sociology, okay, who were trained in the discipline. Indology was used along with other theoretical perspectives which made it more rational. For example, G.S. Ghurye employed a synthesis of classical Indology and anthropology and gave a diffusionist approach. So Ghurye mixed Indology and anthropology. D.P. Mukherjee combined with Marxian framework to develop a Marxological approach. Okay, so I think I have mentioned Radha Kamal Mukherjee before. That is this perspective. Radha Kamal Mukherjee employed a synthesis of classical Indology and empirical sociology. So you will see different synthesis here. Even after 1947, Indology continued to be used as a source of historical information about Indian society, but its emphasis kept on reducing with a gradual increase in the use of field view. So post 1947, which is dominant, field view or actual reality is dominant because structural functional perspective, right, by Srinivas. But to develop your study, for example, if you need to study caste, so what is the starting point? Starting point is the basic knowledge about caste, right? So from where you get that, you will get the Indological sources. That's what, even after 1947, Indology continued to be used as a source of historical information. For example, you are studying caste, you can use field work. But if you need to use field work, you should be knowing what exactly this is in theory or in books. Okay. For example, M.N. Srinivas used Indological perspective to supplement his fieldwork along with the structural functional perspective. It was used later on by different sociologists to reinforce their fieldwork. Now that's done. Any doubts here? We'll go for criticism. Criticism of Indology or critical analysis of Indology. Here, see, like the European thinkers, what we have done, we don't do here like that. Okay, we don't want to talk about too much contribution, relevance, etc. We will directly move on to criticism. Thus, the contribution of this perspective in developing an initial understanding of society cannot be ignored, but still, after independence, Indology lost its relevance on account of the following reasons. Indology could not fully explain the empirical reality. Okay, because you understood the reason, it is only focusing on the book view, not the actual structural reality. So when it comes to the structural functional perspective, this will be reflected more, as there was always a gap between normative order which was drawn from the text and the actual structure which was seen in reality. M.N. Srinivas' view on dominant caste. Okay, I've told you this, caste, Brahmins are dominant as per the books, but it is not necessary Brahmins are always dominant. In some areas, he gave the concept, M.N. Srinivas gave the concept that is dominant caste. Some areas, some other caste who are not non-Brahmins are dominant. But conditions are there, numerical strength has to be there, education has to be there, land wealth should be there, etc. Second one, contradictory informations in various Indological concepts induced subjectivity in the analysis. These are common criticism. A number of different assumptions emerged on the basis of different religious texts, leading to development of contradictory Indological schools. There was no consensus on the status of women in Indian society, right? On one side, she will be treated as goddesses, right? Durga, Lakshmi, all these goddesses are women. On the other side, patriarchal society is what practice, male child is preferred. So on the other side it is, so there is no consensus on women, okay? So the authenticity of the religious scriptures and the other sources were questionable. There were no means of judging the reliability of the information. For example, the textbooks portrayed a solidaristic, cooperative and harmonious picture of Indian village. So we will study about village, so you will understand the sentence more. So the traditional society, the villages were understood as solidaristic, cooperative and harmonious in nature. But there were a lot of issues, exploitative nature of caste system, Jajmani system, village patriotism. We will discuss different concepts when it comes to villages, okay? Particularly earlier Indologists and Indological studies have been accused of biased by the colonial interest. I've told you this. They refer to the selective text to develop an orthodox and backward view of Indian society. Similarly, the Indian initial Indologists were biased for their nationalist interest. Therefore, the classical Indology could not develop an objective view. So we are saying the initial Indologists were biased against India, that means colonial interest. The later Indian Indologists, they were biased against their nationalist interest. So no objective view within Indology. So these are the main criticisms. So what you can mainly write is, this is the most important criticism. Okay, this if 10 marker, you have to incorporate only this. So other things, subjectivity, all this reliability, these are supplementary. But if the question is about 10 marker, you have to go with the first one. It is totally different from the actual reality or the structural reality. Okay, that's about Indology. Any doubts?